Oh, man. Happy Monday, everybody. It's another Living Force. I hope you're having a great day. We are here talking about Padawan tonight. It's another roundtable. We're going to dive right into the latest YA novel from Disney Lucasfilm. Very excited about that. We have a little bit of scenery change for some of us here on the show, but wherever you are, whether you're listening, whether you're watching, I hope you enjoy. I hope you're ready for some spoilers ahead, and I know I'm ready for Wes to punch it. Hello, everyone! Welcome to the Living Force, a UTD Network podcast all about Padawan, tonight at least. I'm one of your hosts, Eric Eilerson, and joining me to talk all about the latest novel from Kiersten White is the full crew. Usually I would say hello to our first guest, but today I'll say aloha! It's Dr. Corey Elton! What's up, man?
Aloha from Hawaii. I am joined here by my luxurious condo that I just purchased here using my Star Wars money. Yes, I am in Hawaii. This episode of Living Force is sponsored by Hawaii.gov. That's not true. That would be really cool, though.
Hawaii! It's really great. That's the tag.
Yes, that's the tag. Yes, I am joining you from Hawaii. I'm on a vacation out here. It is a miracle that we're making this happen. I have just technology is kind of insane. You want to see my view? I'll show you out the window here. Look at this.
No.
This is my view. There you go. You get to see it.
Describe it for our audio listeners, Corey.
Yes, for our audio listeners, I am mere steps from my porch where there is a lovely ocean view.
Describe your shirt
nice.
next for the audience.
Oh my god, I'm wearing a blue Hawaiian shirt that Charles eloquently described as the ugliest shirt he's ever seen. So
you look like a bad street comedian. You look like if John Daly was a podcaster.
Listen, I told you I would. If John, Jesus Christ, it hit me where it hurts. I told you I would wear Hawaiian shirts, so here we are. I only have 3 though, so I get to wear repeated ones at the 1 month mark. So there we go.
Well, I am so thrilled you made it. Yes, this entire month of podcast will be coming from Hawaii, from Corey. You deserve it, man. Now, next up, we have who apparently is the most brutal roaster out of any of us, Dr. Charles Hankel. How's your jealousy going, my dude?
I'm just salty because I'm not in Hawaii. I love Charlotte and all, but it rained all day, and those blue skies just made me mad, Corey. That's all it was.
It did, Charles, it rained a little bit on me earlier too. And, I had to put the top up on my convertible and, it really sucked, man. I had to pull over to the side of the road. There's the water and beach and palm trees over to the side. And then I put the top up. Oh man, it sucks. You know how that is? You know how that is, Charles?
God, I'm just glad you at least have another full month off before you ever have to think about going to work, Corey. You deserve this.
Oh man.
But of course, rounding out our crew, not in Hawaii, and usually I would call him amazing, eloquent, just the most beautiful man in the world, but we have a fantasy football draft tomorrow, so he's my brutal enemy for the next 48 hours. It's Wes Jenkins.
What's up? Happy Labor Day, everyone. Everybody who labors, whether you're birthing a new child or you're going to work every day, happy Labor Day.
I hope you did neither of those today.
Oh dear, I did not know where that was going to go, Wes.
Yes, happy in Labor Day, as we will now call it. Happy to see you, man. Happy to see all of you here. Of course, if you're tuning in live, hello. If you're all watching or listening later on, I hope you're having a great week. We are, of course, here to talk all about Padawan tonight in one of our roundtables. Before we do that, we do want to say a couple quick things. We want to reference last week's show. We had a lovely draft episode of Spies and Scoundrels in anticipation of Andor, which is coming up in less than 3 weeks. Like 2.5 weeks. I cannot wait. It's almost here. But we did put up a poll on who had the best team. And Wes, I believe we have some data. Would you mind just sharing with our audience? These were our teams.
You first prefaced that we want to go to the Spies and Scoundrels draft and talk about it.
Yes.
No, we don't. No, we don't want to.
Yes,
do
we
this.
do.
You want to talk about this. So this is our draft board for our listeners. Corey's draft. Just go run through it right quick. Corey did Lando, Tobias Beckett, Val, Mission Val, and Tycho Selchu. Eric
Nailed
went
it.
Han Solo, Vi Morardi, Jin Urso, Karen Aiden, and Del Miko. Charles is Cassian Andor, Dexter Jester, Winter, Kyle Katarn, Dash, Renda. And I, probably the best team there, was Mon Mothma, Chewbacca, Iden Versio, Galen Urso, and Armitage Hux. And for the poll results, which was astounding to me and everybody else except for Eric, Eric won. Eric won 36.6% of the votes.
100% cheated. Absolutely.
We asked the wrong question. We were creating who would pull off a heist successfully. That's what we were drafting.
I just want to thank
best crew.
That was
I want to thank the 36.6% of our audience that just felt what was right and went with their hearts. I legit think this might be the first draft I've won. And it's my favorite thing. So
there's no way there's no way that that's true. This cannot be the first
it might be.
You won the last one, Corey. Wes has won at least one.
I should have won it again. I'm not sure what happened with my
We came in dead last.
Following. I know we did.
We'll find out on our next one, of course. Let us know also in the comments or on Twitter, anywhere you find us. If you have a draft episode you'd like us to do in the future, we're always planning ahead. Let us know. We do enjoy doing these, and it's a little fun competition as life goes on. I do also want to mention, I briefly said it, we do have our Utini Fantasy Football League draft tomorrow night. It's the third year in a row we've done this. Wes and I have been in. Wes, you've been in every year, right? Were you in the first year?
I was in it the first year. Yes, I was.
Okay, yeah. So we've been in all 3 years. I'm drafting in the second spot. Wes, do you know what you're drafting tomorrow night?
I don't know. Should I? Do y'all have that up already? Should I know this?
Oh yeah, it was 3 weeks ago. I put the draft over. It's fine. It's good. Wes, I'll say it right now. Wes, I'm gonna look it up. I'm gonna let our folks know, and then we'll get off of real football for a while. I promise. Wes, you're in the 6th spot at the 12-team league. You're right in the middle, baby.
Okay, cool.
So, it's gonna be fun. Last year, if you haven't listened to our show last year, I do a little bit of fantasy updates as the years go on. A couple of us really love doing it this time of year, so I'm very excited to jump in there with some staff members and, of course, some listeners that have been in there for a couple of years. So very excited for football to be back, and I promise there will be a minimum amount of sports talk on this podcast, but there will be just a little. Jacob in the chat asks who won. I can't say. Who knows? The data's lost, Jacob. No one will ever find out who won and who was last. It's deleted. The archives do not exist. The only piece of news I wanted to chat with you fellows about before we get to Padawan in a bit, Disney Plus Day is officially coming this week on September 8th. This has been a little back and forth over the years. Sometimes we get really cool announcements. Sometimes we get literally nothing. And it's all around the streaming service, right? Around the Marvel projects, the Disney, and sometimes the Star Wars. I've seen on Twitter, guys, some ideas that maybe we'll get something about like Tales of the Jedi, Bad Batch Season 2. You know, those things that have been completely silent since Star Wars Celebration, but are apparently coming out this year. Any predictions for what we might get this week? Or do you think we're getting zero Star Wars content on Disney Plus Day?
That would be a little super shocking to me if we got zero Star Wars content, because I mean, Star Wars has been one of the leading drivers of revenue for Disney Plus. I think just from a pure money perspective, they've been really forward about that, about like Mandalorian, like pushed a ton of subscribers into Disney Plus. So
yeah,
I would be shocked if we don't get something, even if it's just like an image or like, you know, they could clarify the schedule or something like that maybe, but I don't know.
Yeah, I would be shocked too. Unfortunately, like I think that, yeah, Jacob, you said a sizzle reel would be, you know, something like that. I just don't want it to be like a retrospective of like, look how well we've done. Yeah. Aren't we great? I'm like, yeah, but I know what Marvel movies are coming out in 2027. Okay, like, can I please know what's coming after Andor? Maybe,
I know, seriously. You know, the other thing that we should mention too about the Disney Plus thing is there are some interesting rumors circulating, and you know, the only reason I bring this up is because we literally just talked about this with our Rise of Skywalker speculation. There's some images circulating saying that John Boyega is participating in Disney Plus Day, which is a little shocking to me. Yeah, right. So I don't know. Interesting to see that. I don't know if he's willing to work for Disney again. I don't know. Very interesting stuff.
Shocking in a sense that he said he wouldn't do Star Wars again. Is that what it is?
Yeah, because I kind of that interview, he was like, he said something along the lines of like Finn's story might go on, but he's had his part. He was very diplomatic about it, obviously, but you could tell. I mean, John got burned pretty bad by being in Star Wars and spoke up for a lot of things that are now being rectified. Yeah. But I mean, Marvel does seem like a different beast, even though it's still Disney. The actors that work in the Marvel Cinematic Universe just seem to really feel supported.
They're also just kind of frankly more diverse in general.
Yeah,
I mean, the Marvel universe is, I don't know, weirdly larger than Star Wars, like just by cast and involvement and because of modern storytelling and that sort of thing too, right? So
yeah.
Yeah, I think the thing like that, it's really probably more so about the people you're working directly with.
That's probably
not
true.
So much like Disney, because does that mean John Boyega will never guest on Scott Van Pelt because Disney's technically his boss? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true.
Yeah,
true.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. Obviously, by the time you listen to this episode at the end of the week, we will know any of the secrets, or if it was, all for nothing. And I'm not saying Disney has ever promised a large announcement day and literally nothing has happened before, but it could, who knows what's going to happen. But of course, we'll tell you next week when we find out. A couple other updates we want to say in our Patreon community. We wanted to give a shout out to one of our awesome Patreon shows that some of you may listen to on delay, and that's called the Star Wars Archives. Our buddies Trev and Jose host that show where they do deep dives into some amazing parts of the Star Wars universe. We want to give them a shout out because 3 Sundays from now, which is September 25th, they will be releasing their 50th episode. And the big thing about the 50th is that it will be a Patreon exclusive for its entirety. So most of the episodes are released on public streaming about 3 months afterwards, which is great. For those of you that aren't able to join our Patreon, that's fine. But episode 50 will forever be a Patreon exclusive. So if you've been waiting for the time that, do I want to jump on UT's Patreon, see what's going on? There's never a better time. And we also just want to say a huge shout out to Trev and Jose for continuing this awesome show for 50 episodes. That is
50 episodes is no small feat. Absolutely.
Big accomplishment for sure.
Yeah. And it's going to be a fun one. So keep your eyes peeled for that. And then episode 49 drops this upcoming Sunday. So if you're on our Patreon, make sure you're checking out the Star Wars Archives. And if you haven't, you know what? Maybe jump on for a month and get to binging. We also want to kind of start stoking the fires, a little bit of a tease. Our Asheville documentary that we've been working on for quite a bit now, behind the scenes, is imminent. I think it's the word we're comfortable saying, right, guys? It's imminent.
Yes, it is
on
imminent.
Its way. It's at the doorstep.
Yeah.
So
it's going, hello.
I don't think UTini has ever put so much effort and energy into a video project before. I mean, we have literally gone through, I think, 3 full recuts of it, I believe, like essentially. And
yep. And it's hefty.
Nathan has a lot of hours in the editing room on this one, and the final product is very, very good. And I hope it's as meaningful for our community, I think, as it has been for the 5 of us that got to go on that trip, because like in a lot of ways it has sort of defined our friendship. And I think that if you are a listener of the Living Force and like you've been around for a while, a couple years, or you've been in and out of our community, or you've got to know us a little bit, like I think you will sort of be able to feel what we felt from watching this, because like it was really a profound experience to get to put into live action, I guess you could say, what our friendship has been online all this time. So, if you've been on the fence for a while about joining Patreon, the documentary is done and it's going to come out very soon. So, if we've been teasing that for a long time, but now it's finally ready, and I think we're going to roll out the red carpet for it and make it a fun event. And I hope that everybody enjoys it as much as we did, because it was a ton of fun to create, and I'm very, very happy with the final product. And I think I can speak for all of us when I say we got very emotional when we watched it. So,
oh man, I was so unhelpful in this editing process, because from the first cut, I'm like, it's perfect. I'm crying like I had nothing to give, which is not helpful. Luckily, I have you fine fellas to be like, this is great. We could tighten this up. We could edit this. And I'm like, that's even better. Like, I was just a mess the whole time, guys. Yeah. So very stoked. Again, that will be forever Patreon exclusive. So keep your eyes peeled. We will, of course, make a full announcement when it is officially released over at utini.com/Patreon or patreon.com/utini. But we want to let you guys know very, very soon. And yes, the final cut is done. All right. Other couple things you want to keep your eyes out for, not just our content at Utini, you silly billies. Star Wars is also making stuff. And you want to head over to the utini.com release calendar because we are now officially within a month of the next Star Wars book release. Didn't Princess and the Scoundrel just come out? Yup. Don't you have a Roundtable? Yup. Anyway, we have another book that's coming out October 4th, everybody. Phase 2 of the High Republic officially begins. The High Republic Path of Deceit comes out. Tessa Gratton on Twitter today posted that she actually got her author's proof copy. The uncorrected advanced copy is in their hands. So that's super exciting. It's becoming real. October 4th. Then, of course, George Mann's The High Republic Quest for the Hidden City, the middle grade novel, comes out November 1st, with Zoraida Cordova's adult novel, The High Republic Convergence, coming out November 15th. As always, make sure you get those pre-orders in, because even though it's been a while, I can still confidently say there is nothing like the hype of a day one High Republic release. You want to be in this community when it comes in. You want that book on your doorstep day one. Then jump in the Discord channels, jump on Twitter. There's really nothing quite like it. And Andor might be done by then, so you got time. All right. Now that I've scared Charles enough with the future books that are coming up, I think it's time to talk about our recent release of Kiersten White's Padawan. From this point on, everyone, just as a warning, we will be going full spoilers about this book. So if you haven't read it yet, just hit pause, listen to it on Audible, read the book, then come back. But if you either have read it or you just want to see what we thought about it, buckle up, because Charles, it is roundtable time. Let's do it.
All right. And just reminding y'all that this is a one-parter. We're just going to do one part on Padawan. So we got a lot to get through. So let's go ahead and jump in with the plot synopsis. A 16-year-old Obi-Wan Kenobi can't seem to find his way. He fails to understand his master, Qui-Gon Jinn, and his insistence on staying in the Jedi Temple to practice meditation. He yearns to go on adventures like the other Padawans. To make matters worse, Count Dooku visits the temple, and rumors of Qui-Gon once again arguing with the council begin to spread. While wandering around the temple, Obi-Wan stumbles upon ancient carvings left by the High Republic's Orla Jareni and Comac Vitus that point toward a lost planet named Lenara with some unknown significance. Obi-Wan informs Qui-Gon of his findings, bending the truth to claim the Force led him to his discovery, and requests they investigate. Qui-Gon agrees. However, on the day of their planned departure, Qui-Gon doesn't show up. In a moment of recklessness, Obi-Wan appropriates a shuttle and decides to go off on his own. On the way to Lenara, Obi-Wan discovers a distress beacon and takes it aboard his ship. When he does, a mysterious figure across the galaxy is alerted. Shortly after, Obi-Wan arrives on the planet and encounters the locals, who are all children, led by siblings Aj and Castle. He's amazed to find that they have physical abilities similar to his own, though they claim to know nothing of the Force or the Jedi. He quickly learns that these abilities are necessary, as Lenara is an incredibly dangerous place where the wildlife and the planet itself constantly attack, trying to drive sentience off-world. Over the ensuing days, Obi-Wan learns more about the planet. All the adults on Lenara are gone, but the exact reasoning is left unclear. The children who remain get their abilities from something they call the power, which they harvest from the planet. When one of the younglings goes missing, Obi-Wan ventures into the wild on his own and discovers Lenara is not aggressive toward him unless he's with one of the others, though he doesn't yet understand why. Despite the dangers, Obi-Wan realizes he feels quite free on Lenara, away from Qui-Gon, the Jedi, and all of their rules. Though he's hurt by Qui-Gon abandoning him, he's surprised by how at home he feels amongst the Lenarans. The day of the harvest arrives, and the Lenarans bring Obi-Wan to a deep scar in the land from a crashed ship. Obi-Wan finds carvings depicting the demise of previous generations of Lenarans, as well as a hollow recording from Orla Jareni. They all venture deep underground and find a pool filled with glowing orbs. The Lenarans begin stealing and consuming the orbs. Obi-Wan realizes this is what gives them their power, but he can also feel through the Force how wrong what they're doing is. The planet reacts violently, screaming in rage and sending all of its wildlife and weather to attack. Obi-Wan desperately tries to get the Lenarans to return the power, but they refuse.
Once back to safety, Obi-Wan confronts the Lenarans. In an attempt to defend their actions, Aj explains more about their history. Their parents learned about and used the power in an effort to help them survive more easily, but the planet rebelled. And the more power their parents consumed, the more their bodies broke down. The adults held a vote, and while some opted to leave Lenara, others couldn't give up the power and chose to stay. They passed on the ways of the harvest to their children. Obi-Wan tries to convince them that there is another way of life, but Oj accuses him of being jealous that their abilities rival his own. Suddenly, another ship appears. An investigation reveals that Oj and Kessel's uncle Logrib has returned, having tracked down the beacon that Obi-Wan rescued from space. He tells the tale of being forced to leave Lenara and claims to have come back to be reunited with his family. But upon further digging, Obi-Wan discovers that he has actually returned to take all the power for himself. When Obi-Wan warns the Lenarans, Oj and Kessel turn against him. Frustrated, Obi-Wan goes off on his own into the wilderness to meditate and finds that he is finally able to deeply connect with both the Force and the planet. Oj finds him surrounded by serene wildlife. Shocked into listening, she finally comes to agree with Obi-Wan. Together, the Lenarans all return to the cave and give back the power they harvested, bringing peace to the planet once more. They hurry to Logrib's ship to convince him to abandon his plan, but Logrib cannot be reasoned with, and a fight breaks out. Logrib scurries into the caves, and Obi-Wan, Oj, and Kessel follow to find him at the pool, having just consumed as much power as possible, now entirely beyond reasoning. He attacks with frightening strength and injures both Oj and Kessel. In a desperate attack, Oj consumes one last power orb to help in the fight, knowing it may end her truce with the planet. However, Logrib still gets the better of her. As the last one standing between Logrib and Lenara, Obi-Wan remembers one of Qui-Gon's teachings and is able to hurl a small stone through the Force, striking Logrib in the forehead, causing him to fall and be crushed by the very boulder he was about to throw. Though Logrib is defeated, danger has not dissipated. With so much power having been consumed, Lenara and its wildlife turn on everyone, making it clear no one is welcome on the planet anymore. The Lenarans escape with Obi-Wan just before the planet closes itself off forever. After parting ways, Obi-Wan returns to the temple, frightened that he will be kicked out of the Order for his insolence. Instead, he is greeted by Qui-Gon, who implies Obi-Wan was always meant to go off on his own so that he could finally find a true connection with the Force. Despite his trials, Obi-Wan finds he is pleased to be back among the temple, the Jedi, and his master. He wholeheartedly pledges to continue on his path wherever the Force may lead him.
All right, so there's everything that happened. There's your recap. Anyone didn't read the book, Corey? You read the book, right?
I read the book. I read it on the plane yesterday.
So let's all take a moment to reflect on this story. What did you get out of this reading experience? What value did this book bring to you? And what got you just really excited? Eric, let's go to you first.
So this book, I got a really interesting look at Obi-Wan that I had never had before. I think that I'd never conceived in my mind what he would be like as kind of a young individual Jedi, without Qui-Gon, without Satine, without Anakin, without anybody. And it was interesting seeing him kind of in this place where he's not as polished as we'd ever seen him before. And I'm always a sucker for Force lore, crystal lore, as I've said on the show multiple times. And it was interesting seeing the Force or the power, what have you, through the lens of other characters like the Lenarans, and I liked that a lot. As far as the value I got out of this, I think I got some value of Obi-Wan's character by seeing where he is in this book to where he is by the time we get to the Phantom Menace, because it is a pretty decent jump. He is makes a little more rash decisions. He's a little more unsure of himself, and realizing that a kid like that can eventually, grow into Obi-Wan and be the guy we want was really helpful. And I think now when I watch Phantom Menace or watch Obi-Wan or anything like that in the future, I'm going to remember he used to not have everything together. And that arc gets a little more deepened. And then finally, as far as what got me really excited about this book, it's going to be no surprise for anyone that's ever listened to this show. Freaking the Drenny and Comac got mentioned. Anytime the High Republic comes into the OG canon, I get super stoked. So the fact that now Obi-Wan Kenobi knows the name Orla Jareni and Comac Vitus because they're in the temple, it just kind of strengthens the High Republic's grip on the lore. So that really was probably my most exciting thing for me, even though it was pretty small relatively, wasn't really part of the general narrative. Anytime we get more Orla Jareni content, I'm all in. So that was probably weirdly my most excited bit, even though it was on page 7. Oh, and Dex.
Oh yeah, yeah. I kind of forgot about that. Yeah, I mean, this book was fun. I think that's probably the best way to sum it up is that it was fun, right?
Yep.
It was really short. YA maybe in a little bit of a stretch, I think, in my opinion. It almost feels like it was kind of geared toward a little bit more of a younger audience, really. Even it wasn't quite middle grade either, though. You know what I mean? It was like a little bit over the line of middle grade. I feel like
it puts the Y in YA, I think.
Yeah, I think so. That's probably a good way to put it. This would certainly be a YA book that is maybe geared towards a little bit younger of an audience than, say, Lost Stars, for example. I think.
Sure.
But yeah, I think it was fun. I think we got to see an insecure side of Obi-Wan that we'd never seen before. I think that was an interesting take to see what I love. That sort of the principal theme of the book seemed to be how Obi-Wan was becoming the negotiator, right? Like that seemed to be the whole vibe. The whole book was that, like, we're learning to see how he's able to develop that skill and is sort of realizing that is his special force power. You know what I mean? Like you press triangle and you get Obi-Wan negotiating, right? Like that's how so it was fun to sort of get that angle a little bit. So I enjoyed that.
So I thought it was cool to see that Obi-Wan was unsure of himself. It's almost like we're watching him grow up because we're starting from really, really young. Is this the youngest that we've seen Obi-Wan in a book for?
In canon,
yeah, in canon, I would say so.
So he's essentially growing up right before our eyes because we have the books and then we have the Phantom Menace. So it's neat to see that he goes through some insecurities, like you said, Corey, and it's kind of relating to a lot of people in the world right now. So yeah, so he was like some insecure and he was very unsure of himself, but then he took that extra step and he went on an adventure on his own, and I thought that was really cool of him to do. But also, like there was a good portion of the book where they talked about Count Dooku coming back and kind of getting Qui-Gon to come back with them. It's like, hey, Qui-Gon, Jedi Order's not what it was all cracked up to be, man. You can come be a rich, awesome dude over here in where I'm at, and we can have all the parties and festivities we want, but we can still be good guys. But but yeah, that was one of the parts that excited me was the Count Dooku part that happened in the beginning.
Yeah. Why is Master Duke here? Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, is he supposed to be here? I don't know. It's fine. I don't know. Is he expelled?
I love that. I love that we got to see that through the angle of like the Padawans. They're all like talking smack and everything, and like spreading the rumors. And that was fun. That was fun.
The Lost, is that what they are? The Lost?
Yeah, they called them
the Lost 20.
Lost,
yeah. Yeah, and I missed that because I think we've talked on the show a couple times about how we kind of missed that level in canon of like some of the hidden legends of like the Harry Potter-ish nature of the Jedi Temple. Like I want to see them as kids hanging out in that first couple chapters of the like messing with food fighting and like kind of talking about I have to go to saber class or whatever. They were picking on
Obi-Wan. I love that. They were like oh, you better look out, Qui-Gon's next, you're not gonna have a master. That was funny, dude. That's exactly how it would be.
Nobody's gonna want to train you. He's like, oh,
that's
exactly.
Like, and it's so brutal because that's like your mom's gonna leave you. That's like really brutal.
Dude, middle schoolers are brutal though, dude. Like for real. But
valid.
All right. Well, I agree with everything you guys said. It was the summer of Obi-Wan. It was a nice way to finish the summer of Obi-Wan.
Summer of Obi-Wan.
So let's talk about him a little bit more. We're going to jump into the character section, and it's actually just going to be Obi-Wan tonight. So a few quotes for you. On page 32, all Obi-Wan wanted was to be a Jedi Knight, to go out into the galaxy and be an agent of goodness, of order, of the light. He couldn't do any of that stuck in the temple. Sure, he could run through the basic lightsaber combat forms in his sleep, and he could use the force to push and pull and jump. His physical abilities were more than adequate, but he couldn't shake the fear that spiritually he didn't have what it took to be a knight. And that constant fear made him feel both guilty and more afraid. It was a terrible cycle he didn't know how to break out of, one he was certain was holding him back, both from his connection to the force and his own potential. Maybe if he could get out of the temple, if he could go among the stars, an active Jedi, maybe then he could feel the force guiding him. Maybe then he could feel like he deserved to be a Padawan. Later on page 122, when it came to the other aspects of the force, communing with it, not using it as an extension of himself like a lightsaber to be wielded, but getting to the point where he was an extension of the force. Well, maybe that was why Qui-Gon didn't bother with him. Why Qui-Gon apparently hadn't even wanted him in the first place. Obi-Wan scowled. Who was he kidding? He couldn't explain the Force to anyone because he couldn't figure out what it was to him in the first place. Later on page 288. Oh, and these page numbers are probably going to be off because I lost my physical copy of the book halfway through and I ended up buying it on Kindle and it all changed. Anyways.
I've been at your house, Charles. Where is it?
I know. Maybe on page 288. Ish. Obi-Wan felt powerless, truly powerless for the first time in his life. His lightsaber was useless against this. His own abilities not enough to counter Logrib's rush of temporary, unbelievable strength. A sudden calm settled over Obi-Wan. The frantic energy he was absorbing from Lenara finally quieted. Obi-Wan sealed himself off, creating a single point of focused clarity amid the violent fury around him. Logrib was right. Obi-Wan was a Padawan. He was one very small person in a vast galaxy. Remember, Qui-Gon had said, sometimes the Force works in very small ways too. And then the very end of the book, page 303, he was ready at last to walk the path that lay ahead of him, to learn what he must, and to prepare in every way he could for whatever his destiny might be, to accept loss, to embrace change, and most important, to never let fear separate him from the Force again. He was ready for a future as a Jedi, but right now, today, he was a Padawan, and it had never felt better. So how would you describe the change in Obi-Wan's relationship with the Force throughout this book? And what do you think it was that truly prompted that change?
I mean, I think it just basically, I think he just learns how to listen to it. I think it's the Yoda of it all. I think by the beginning, he's having such a hard time meditating because he's like, how do I do this correctly? Which is also, I think, one of the most like relatable things Obi-Wan's ever done. Like, how do I listen right? Which is very AP kid kind of thinking. And then
you ever overthought breathing?
Yeah. You know what, Charles? We're not getting. This isn't about me. It's about Obi-Wan Kenobi. But at the end, I think he realizes finally what listening to the will of the Force means. And I think being on a planet that is literally like speaking out so viscerally prompted that for him. That's what I got out of it.
I totally agree with that. Like once he noticed that the planet, the animals there, the fauna wasn't trying to kill him, much like his friends or the kids that he met, that kind of just made an epiphany in his mind. He was like, hold on a second. I'm listening to the Force. I can feel around the planet and the people that are there, and there's something wrong here. And then that problem solving in your younger days helped him to get to that next point of, oh wow, listening through this Force, I can understand that there's something wrong with these kids and they're eating the planet. And me, there's something right about me listening to the Force.
They're eating the planet. Stop it.
Yeah, we'll get around to the power and all that. There's a pretty interesting concept, and there's some kind of parallels you could draw to the real world. But yeah, Obi-Wan's relationship, I was just kind of shocked in the beginning to see how disconnected from the Force he was. Because you mentioned, Eric, that you know he's a very different person in the Phantom Menace than he is in this book, and he's 16 years old, like we mentioned. So, you know, I would think of a 16-year-old, even Padawan, as not having trouble with some of the things that we view as very basic, at least within the Force, like meditation. But what's interesting is how often he talked about how the physical aspects, using the Force to do what he wants, was easy, right? Like the pushing, the pulling, the jumping, that wasn't a problem. It was listening to the Force, just sitting, being quiet. That's what he was bad at.
Yeah, that's not stuff that you like usually attribute to Obi-Wan, right? Like he's usually kind of like the wise master, very in tune with the Force. So I thought it was kind of refreshing to see this sort of childlike angle of, you know, not really understanding what he's supposed to be doing. And like, I don't know. I guess my question, with the way that this was presented is, I wonder if Obi-Wan could have grown like without this experience, right? Would he have ever found, because there was very much this sort of almost manipulation by Qui-Gon and stuff to like make him find it on his own, which I don't know if necessarily is the right call. It's almost like parenting, right? Like you just let your kid, figure everything out on their own. Is it more valuable if you experience that way, or is it okay to show them and stuff to some degree? So I don't know. It was very interesting to see that Obi-Wan had to go sort of against what we see and know as Obi-Wan, like of the rule follower and, you know, the wise master that he is. Like he had to go against that to kind of learn those lessons. It's very interesting to me, and it made for a fun story for sure.
Yeah, Brandon has a good point in the chat that he thought this was one of the most YA Star Wars YA books because of the figuring it out, like finding who you are themes. Like that's such a prevalent thing in non-Star Wars YA. Like the coming of age story is such an important thing. And like if I was 16 reading this book about 16-year-old Obi-Wan, I'm like pretty much guaranteed to be going through the exact same thing. Mm-hmm. So I think that part of it is so prevalent because I think we're more used to the YA books, like you said, with Lost Stars or like Midnight Horizon or like the books lately that they're young, but they do still kind of have stuff more figured out and they are kind of more action based. So I think this one was interesting in that way. And Corey, you know, you asked, would he have been able to figure this out without this? I think it's an interesting point. You know, I think that Qui-Gon as master is always interesting because we always ask the question, what if he had been Anakin's master? Then it would have been fine. And after reading this book, I'm like, you know what? Maybe not. Because what if I don't think you should let Anakin Skywalker just go off and do whatever he wants. I think that would have been pretty bad, you know?
Yeah. Anakin would have come back and been like, you're not mad? And he'd be like, no, you were always supposed to go off by yourself. And he'd be like, and I was supposed to kill all the Tuskens too. Like, what?
I was supposed to do that. Oh, awesome. I was afraid that was going to be bad.
You're never going to believe this. There were all these kids on this planet and they had crashed there and they were like screwing up the planet. So I just killed them all and solved the problem. Like it was
save the planet. We can put a temple there now. Isn't that
great? My new empire. Yeah.
Oh, don't worry. I also killed the women and the children. Like, we're good.
Oh, God.
All right. No, go ahead, Wes.
I say Obi-Wan's anxiety ran rampant all before he even made it onto the ship to leave the planet.
Yeah.
I mean, he was
Don't
thinking
they have
about
like
Qui-Gon
therapists
leaving.
At the Jedi Temple or something? Shit, man.
We learned that.
We really
learned
should.
that in the High Republic, I think.
So, what was it a good idea for Qui-Gon just to let him do that on his own? I think it was. I think it was important for him to kind of learn that on his own. But the whole time he was like, "Oh my God, is Qui-Gon even going to be there? Is he going to be upset with me?" I mean, it was just eating away at him the entire book. And so, Qui-Gon being like, "Oh, I didn't even know you were really gone." Nobody else did. He was like, I kind of saved the lives of like 20 people. But
I know. I love that. I love that Qui-Gon also uses it as like a subtle FU to the council too. Of like, we don't got to tell them. They don't need to know everything. You know what I'm saying? Like they don't need to know everything.
I'm a cool dad.
Exactly. We won't tell your mom. Like, don't worry.
Yeah, I like the anxieties you bring up, Wes. I don't have this quote handy, but there was a really nice quote about how Obi-Wan had no trouble connecting with the Force when he was a youngling or an initiate because like he expected it to work. And then it was kind of like the anxieties about the connection itself that ended up blocking that connection. And I think that was very relatable. But so let's talk about Obi-Wan then. We talked about him at the temple and sort of all the things that were going into his struggle. Let's talk about him once he got in with the Lenarans. So I have a few more quotes here, page 140. Obi-Wan reached for a cable then, knowing such an unnecessary use of the Force would be considered excessive, even distasteful at the temple. He jumped straight off the ship, savoring the freedom of falling while knowing he would catch himself at the bottom. And on page 142, what if the Jedi were wrong, though? That should be a bumper sticker. What if they were all just fooling themselves that the Force was guiding them, listening and deciding for themselves what it was saying based on what they wanted to do anyway? What if there really was just power in how you used it? No, that line of thinking reeked of the dark side. And while there was definitely something off here, he'd seen Aj and the others. They cared for each other. They put each other's safety above their own. They didn't seem to move through the world with hate or greed or fear. And finally, page 145, he resolved to stop thinking about the code and the ways he was or wasn't following it, to stop thinking about Qui-Gon and what he would be doing in this situation. This was Obi-Wan's mystery, and he would solve it as he saw fit. So in your own words, what was it exactly that Obi-Wan discovered on Lenara that was so attractive to him? What was it that made him... or Castle.
Or Castle,
honestly.
Either one.
No, what was it that made him say, like, you know what? I think I could be happy just staying here.
Corey, it sounds like you in Hawaii today. What? Can you just like, what? I can just stay here.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I think there was like, he felt like he almost had a place, I guess, amongst it was very much of like, what are they called in Peter? The Lost Boys?
Lost Boys,
yeah,
yes.
okay, I was trying to think if that was the
100%.
rose. Like Lost Boys and Peter Pan kind of thing, like a bunch of kids like running rampant, doing whatever they want. Like, I don't know. He kind of like, that is sort of this, I think it was appealing to him because it was kind of like the grass is always green on the other side a little bit because he's kind of a rule follower and that sort of thing. So, but I did find it very interesting that, like he continually reflected on his life without the Jedi Order. That was fascinating to me. Of that he was constantly thinking about, not only is this like, are they going to kick me out? But like, maybe my life would be okay without the Jedi Order, which is something that Anakin was unable to do. So like, I really liked that, that they went there with that, like that Obi-Wan also had those same struggles, which is even more, it makes the story even more beautiful with Anakin because like maybe Obi-Wan would have understood if Anakin had gone to him. Like we've constantly said that like,
yeah,
this story would have been different if Anakin would have, relied on his support system better. Right. And it seems that, the lesson we're getting here is Obi-Wan also went through the same struggles. And I think a lot of Jedi probably do. And Anakin felt very isolated because he had those feelings himself.
But that's such an adolescent thing that no one else could possibly understand what I'm feeling,
Yeah.
Yep.
To feel very alone and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Jacob, I love that in our chat. I would have left if you said the word that Obi-Wan says to Satine.
Oh yeah,
really hits a lot more now because like I think that Obi-Wan, we always talk about him as the consummate Jedi, right? Like that's been the thing is he is a Jedi in the dictionary. It's Obi-Wan Kenobi, but between this and the Satine thing, and I think how he feels about Anakin's training, like I think that he is always kind of on the lookout. Like, is there a better option for me? Possibly, can I just be happy that like the planet is ringing with the Force? I mean, Coruscant is loud and noisy, and there's people, but like there's almost no nature, there's almost no huge Force connection, right? But he could just live on this planet with these people that are taking care of each other and love each other, and or he could go back to like people messing with him and putting stuff in his food and thinking that he's failing all his classes. Like, it read to me like a person that's in their first semester of college and they're having a rough time, first time away from home, and they're like, can I just leave? Like, this is hard. I feel isolated. I don't know what I'm doing. And then you go and hang out with people that accept you and love you for the first time, and it is such an unnatural feeling. And I think Obi-Wan sees that door, and he doesn't take it here. And then he sees that door again with Satine, and he doesn't take it there. And I wonder if during his isolation, during all the years on Tatooine, how often does he remember these 2 points and been like, man, if I would have just taken one of those, either stayed on Lenara, dated with Satine, would it have been better?
That leads me to think, are those instances or those adventures that he did, say this one in Padawan, the one with Satine, did that help make him the quintessential Jedi that we think of as a symbol of the Jedi, right? So he's had these experiences, and he's like, I could have gone off here, I could have gone off there, I could have taken my own path, but I ended up staying true to myself, listening to the Force, and helping the younger generation hopefully succeed in the Jedi versus Sith ultimate battle.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't know why I said it like that, but
that was great, Wes. Say everything like
good.
that.
But yeah, is he a better Jedi for having walked away from these other options and other experiences? I'd say yeah.
Just questioning himself, like in all those instances. So.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a key thing in life too. I think that YA novels really touch on this a lot. Like, you're going to have different paths and you're going to try different things, but every path you take always brings you to where you're supposed to be, right? That's like the idea of life, is that you are who you are because of all your past experiences. And I agree that I think Obi-Wan realizes that. And in the darker times, you think, it's dark because of these paths I took. Or in the light times, it's like, oh, great, everything I took got me here. So I think it varies.
Yeah. Well, let's look at a few more quotes about kind of Obi-Wan's uncertainty from page 234. Obi-Wan looked directly at the gulf of terror inside himself and let it wash over him as he settled on what his fears meant at their core. Obi-Wan cared. He cared so much. He cared about the Jedi Order. He cared about the people in it. He cared about its history, about its rules, about its traditions. Even more than that, he cared about the Force and everything it touched. He cared about all life in the galaxy, including this strange planet and everyone and everything on it. Later on page 299, Obi-Wan says, I truly believe the Force led me to you and Lenara, even when I didn't understand it. I used to think being a Jedi Knight was my only goal and purpose, but that's not quite right. The true purpose of my life is to be a servant of the Force. If that's no longer possible as a Jedi, then so be it. I'll find other ways to help. And then earlier in the book, page 86, the scenario that made it hard to catch his breath, that felt like a weight on his chest, would be arriving home and discovering that absolutely no one had noticed or cared that he was gone, having so little importance in the Order, so little presence in the Force, that he was neither missed nor even thought of when absent. The Jedi Order would be fine without him, but who was he without them? So it's interesting. He actually talks about how you can be a servant to the Force and not be a Jedi, which is something that we kind of talked about in the same way. If you're a servant of the Force, you are a Jedi. He rebukes that a little bit, and then he actually says, who is he without the Jedi Order? And there's your prompt right there. I mean, what did this book show us about who is Obi-Wan without the Order, and how does he show us that?
I mean, that's kind of a crux in tons of YA novels, right? And I feel like we keep coming back to that because this book is just so YA trope heavy, and not in a negative way. It just really fits that, I think, more than a lot of books we've read. I had a community, and now will they care I'm gone? Obviously, the most stereotypical one is I graduated high school. Now what do I do? That's every YA novel, right? It's the summer after graduation, and I was a senior, and I had friends, and now will they even remember me when I go to college? And I think that Obi-Wan essentially has that here. He's realizing, even though the kids have been throwing food in my face or pranking me, even though Qui-Gon has maybe kind of abandoned me from time to time, since he had living memory, he has been in the Jedi Temple. He has been in the Jedi Order. It has been a constant thing. He didn't have to worry about his life path, worry about any choices, because he was a Jedi. He was going to be a Jedi. That was it. And I think this was one of the most identifiable parts of this book for me, was the, who am I without my support systems, without my community? And I think there's a lot of fear in leaving a community like that, whether that be a group of friends from when you were younger, or when it happens to be, another kind of organization. Like, it takes a lot of strength to say, I am willing to leave this for a better opportunity, but there's also a lot of fear in it. So there's a roundabout way of saying that I think that Obi-Wan is finally looking at the Jedi Order objectively for the first time in his life on Lenara. And I think he's like, I think I could be okay without them. But by the end of the novel, he says, but I choose not to. I choose to go back because I think this is still my path.
Yeah, what a difficult thing to even think about is when I leave, did anybody notice I was gone? That's a that's a thing.
That haunts me, man.
When people talk about their legacy, and like, when I die, is anybody going to remember me in 10 years or whatever, even if like a year after? Like, did you leave a lasting legacy? And to think that like that early on in his Jedi career that's very adult of him.
I'm going to start disassociating right now. I swear to God. I'm thinking about,
it's very adult of him, even though he's a little immature in his Jedi teaching so far. So I thought that's tough. That's a tough thing to say.
Yeah, seriously.
Especially in
yeah.
Well, we should probably take a hard right, because now a lot of my own anxieties are starting to manifest. Let's talk a little bit about Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, because I think a lot of those anxieties, a lot of those thoughts, what anyone noticed if I was gone, stemmed from this relationship with Qui-Gon, because he didn't feel close to Qui-Gon, right? He was abandoned. He got stood up. My man got stood up at the ship. So on page 6, Obi-Wan's stomach sank. Was he the source of Qui-Gon's troubles? It seemed like the majority of their training was spent in meditation. The other Padawans were frequently out on missions, serving the Republic, helping the galaxy. Was it Obi-Wan's fault that he wasn't ready? That Qui-Gon seemed content to remain on Coruscant meditating? But maybe it wasn't that Qui-Gon was content. Maybe it was that he was troubled by Obi-Wan, worried that his Padawan wasn't actually ready for anything outside the protection of the temple. Obi-Wan was trying to be the best Padawan. He was trying so hard. But guessing what would impress and please the gentle, unflappable Master Qui-Gon Jinn was almost impossible. Obi-Wan couldn't pass the test if he didn't even know what he was being tested on. On page 8, his stomach twisted with the increasing certainty that the source of Qui-Gon's troubles was, in fact, Obi-Wan himself. He was failing as a Padawan. And page 35, sometimes he wondered why Qui-Gon ever took him on as a Padawan. It wasn't required of Jedi Knights. When they did choose an initiate after the trials, they were always guided by the Force. What had guided Qui-Gon to Obi-Wan? His friends and their masters all made sense together. It seemed to him that he and Qui-Gon had almost nothing in common. And we actually know, of course, that Qui-Gon didn't choose Obi-Wan. Yoda apparently chose Obi-Wan for him. And that idea was explored in this book. But what I'm kind of getting at and driving at here is we've seen a lot of master and apprentice relationships throughout Star Wars. And oftentimes the two have very different personalities and very different approaches to being Jedi. Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon are no different. So what qualities or lessons of Qui-Gon do you see manifest in Obi-Wan, both in this book when he gets to Lenara and as we see him later in the saga once he's a master to Anakin?
Oh man, that's a fantastic question. Honestly, I think Obi-Wan has a healthy distrust of the Jedi Order, maybe is the right word to put it. Like he picked up a little bit of that. Like not enough, not so much that he just like is totally defiant of the Order like Qui-Gon is, because Obi-Wan does, I think, sort of see the point of view of, you know, the Jedi Order a little more than Qui-Gon ever did. But like we get a little bit of that distrust to where he's not really afraid to go against what the Jedi does or stands for. And, you know, that is certainly an Anakin, right? But like I feel like we get a little bit of that I don't know, almost willing to like listen to the Force rather than, you know, the council kind of attitude a little bit. And that's been explored more and more, I think, through canon, right? We had that heavily featured in Master and Apprentice, you know, of like Obi-Wan trying to discover what it means to follow the rules, kind of, right? And he's a little older in that. So I don't know. I think in a lot of ways, Qui-Gon was the perfect master for Obi-Wan. And I wonder if that's really why, if Obi-Wan's ability to be introspective is because of Qui-Gon. Like would he have done as well as a Padawan if he had somebody like a little more, I don't know, action oriented, like Mace Windu or something? Like would he be different? Like probably. I mean, he would probably not be as much of a negotiator as he is.
It's wild to read those quotes, hear those quotes all in order here, Charles. I love how you organize them, because I didn't realize, I think, as I was reading, how much, and I do mean this in all sincerity, it'll sound like a bit, but I do mean this sincerely, like Obi-Wan's Padawan ship sounds almost kind of like an unplanned pregnancy. You know what I mean? Like, I didn't really want to be your master. I didn't really plan for it. Other people told me I should probably do it. And then the apprentice is now like, am I the source of distress of my master? Did they ever want me? Was I was an accident? Like, there's just so many things here that I think are, one, super relatable. I think that master and apprentice relationships are just as fraught as parent-child relationships. Not that anyone's ever had concerns about their parent and has affected them psychologically. I love you, Mom and Dad. You're on Patreon. Also, my mom listens to these shows, and I love you very much. But I do think that it's interesting to like realize that burden on a 16-year-old in this book, and whether the lessons Qui-Gon was teaching him were better or not. I think in this particular book, at least from my point of view, those were almost overshadowed by Obi-Wan's questioning of his purpose and if he's wanted or not. And I think that in this particular case, whether it was Qui-Gon, whether it was Mace, whether it was Yoda, I think that more so than the actual teachings about meditation, I think Obi-Wan is clearly at this stage of his life being way more affected on whether he was wanted 16 years ago or not, or wanted how many years ago he got assigned. I think that trauma clearly hadn't healed just yet. And at the end of the book, we see it healing a little bit, but I think that's part of the problem. And I mean, it's also so poetic that Anakin is similarly thrust onto Obi-Wan. And so that trauma never actually heals because it just transfers to Anakin, who's only wanted in his entire life by Shmi and Padme.
Why didn't Obi-Wan take a Padawan during the Clone Wars? That is an interesting question that I've never considered, because Anakin did not have to be Obi-Wan's only Padawan. I mean, maybe it was common for Jedi to take, some time off between relationships,
right?
Can't
get right back on Hinge there.
I just want to focus on me right now.
That's a good question.
I don't know. It's interesting because it seems like a lot of Jedi were forced to take Padawans. Anakin did which is funny. Yeah. So I don't know. That's an interesting question. Yeah. I feel like, sorry to take us off rails there a little bit.
No, I never thought about it.
But it brings up the question about that, like some masters are really just ready to have Padawans, but also Yoda is like, hey, you should have a Padawan. It's like, bro, Yoda, you haven't had a Padawan since Dooku, my guy. Like, maybe it's your turn to maybe grab another, but it's
sure.
It is such a very interesting thing. The intentionality of apprentices is something that I think I haven't realized this deeply since this book, and it really seems to hit hard in a way that is a lot more relatable to a lot of readers, I think, in their own lives, and I think that's kind of when books are at their best.
I would have been just as frustrated as Obi-Wan felt if I was trying to, and essentially felt to me like he was trying to show his worth and trying to impress Qui-Gon in a way that would bring Qui-Gon to an epiphany, like, wow, this is the exact match that I should have been with. But he, like, not knowing what he's being tested on. I hate that. Like, not knowing what somebody wants, and then you try your hardest to go, and you go in one route, and that's the completely wrong route. You shouldn't have done it that way. And they're just like, but he learned from him, I think, in this book particularly, by just taking off and going on that mission alone. I mean, that's just that little bit from Qui-Gon that was embedded into him. He was like, you know what, I'm out of here. Thanks for standing me up, like you said, Charles.
Yeah. What does this mean? What do you think it means? Just tell me the answers.
Oh man, I would not have gotten along with Qui-Gon literally at all. I would have hated him.
Concrete answers. That's
I
it.
know. It's like totally the opposite of what I want all the time. Yeah.
Well, hey, Qui-Gon, where do you want to go to eat? What do you think? What do you feel? Like, bro, just, you want tacos? Just
whatever you want.
No, not that. I don't know what it is, but it's not that.
Let's meditate on
it. Indecisive Qui-Gon is like a meme from like 2007 or something. Oh God.
All right, well, let's move from the character section on to some overarching questions. And we've actually talked a little bit about this prompt already, so I just kind of want you guys to reiterate a few things, and I want to point something out. This book introduces us again to the youngest, at least novel canon novel, there we go, Obi-Wan that we've ever seen. So did this 16-year-old Obi-Wan, or was he rather, where you expected to find him in his journey, considering he's only a handful of years away from, the Jedi trials, facing down Darth Maul, a lot of the things that we see in the Phantom Menace. Because to remind you, and I checked this against the Utini timeline. This book,
the best timeline on the internet?
Exactly, that's the one. That's the one, the Utini timeline. Padawan it takes place 42 to 40 BBY. Master and Apprentice, if you've read that, is 39 BBY. And then Phantom Menace is 32. So we're only maybe a year out from Master and Apprentice, where I think he reads differently. And then only about 8 years out from when he cuts Darth Maul in half. Spoiler alert.
Yes, I think that we were talking about this a little bit before the show. And I think that sometimes YA books feel maybe like they misage characters a little bit, if that's the right word, because he felt a little young to be 16 to me, I think, in this book. I think that's a fair judgment of, he felt more like 14 or 13, like than he did 16, right? Like, because you make a good point. This is really only a year earlier than Master and Apprentice. He felt older, I think, in Master and Apprentice, I think, a lot. And maybe you can grow a lot from 16 to 17. I'm not really saying you can't, but like, I don't know. It just didn't really quite feel like 16 to me. Like, he was asking questions like, we haven't talked about this actually. The quote unquote controversial scene in the book. We haven't brought this up yet, right? Like,
no,
there's a scene where like, what's his name? What's the
Castle?
Castle?
Yes, Castle makes like, he kind of like makes a joke about like kissing Obi-Wan or something like that. And there was a small section of the internet, which is the worst section of the Star Wars internet, that were really angry about this. Like, oh, Obi-Wan's bi now. He's never been bisexual before. I'm like somebody brought this up in Slack last week, actually, on our team, of like, is this the scene that people are talking about? Because this it doesn't even read like that. So I don't know what the hell everyone's mad about. And two, this was like a tiny, tiny thing. Like, so anyway,
they probably didn't even read the book. They probably just heard that had happened.
Yeah,
and
that's
then
probably
just
true.
blew up out of nowhere.
And I was wondering, Jacob's comment in the chat is exactly what we all discussed. Like, he is questioning his sexuality as a growing adolescent who has been only around middle-aged people giving him homework for 16 years.
Exactly. Yeah.
And now he's like, oh, I can kiss people. Can I kiss them? Maybe. And he could be questioning it. And you know what? Corner of the internet? If he is forevermore bisexual from here on out, okay, great. Or he's just like, I don't know. I can kiss people. Like, the
Jedi are basically asexual anyway. So like, what difference is it? What difference does it make?
That was ridiculous.
Rail have sex with everyone.
Real Averos is pansexual. He'll have sex with anyone and pans. It don't matter, man. Real Averos.
Get railed Averos.
Or he's on vacation, everybody.
Jose, make the t-shirt.
Technical difficulties.
Anyway,
railed Averos.
The reason I brought up that tiny insignificant scene in the book is because I don't think, with medical experience speaking here, children don't have those questions at 16. They have them much younger than that. So like, it felt a little weird that he's 16 years old and been like, oh, I'm thinking about maybe having a first kiss. Like, that's not a 16-year-old thing. That's like a 12-year-old thing or a 13 or a 14-year-old thing. So I felt like that one specific scene kind of highlights, like, maybe that he seemed a little younger in the book than 16, maybe. So, I think that frequently happens in media in general, right? We have 30-year-olds playing high school kids in TV shows all the time, right? So like, it's not that big of a deal to me. It's not really something to get hung up with at all. Like, Luke doesn't act like a 19-year-old in episode 4. I mean, he acts like a freaking 10-year-old sometimes. So, like, right. What difference does it make? But it is an interesting question. Does it sort of fit the timeline? I guess is what you're asking, Charles. Is like, does it fit the timeline? And I felt like maybe not at times. Sometimes yes, but maybe not quite at times. But at the end of the day, that's somewhat irrelevant. If we got another book like tomorrow and he's 15-year-old in the book and he's way more mature than that, I don't care.
Yeah.
Who cares?
Yeah.
Who cares?
It's a great point. And I think that like I will be honest, like similarly, the Master and Apprentice timeline does trip me just because I didn't realize that was so close.
That's very
that's
close,
interesting.
Yeah.
But like for who he is in this story, the character is, at least it does work. For me, does it work better if he's 14, 13? Absolutely. But at the same time, like it was the youngest canonically we can get. And I'm glad that he didn't start off super mature and get immature, or start off super mature and make a giant leap within the same book. So it was like at least consistent within the story.
Here's another in-book like context clue that kind of made it seem the way that he talked about Ilum and going through the, what was it called again? The ceremony thing? The wandering
gathering?
Gathering. Yeah, okay, I think that's it. Yeah. The way he talked about the gathering made it seem maybe way more recent than like it would have been, because they were very young in that, right?
Yeah,
like 8 or 10 or 11 or something like that. And he talked about that like it was like, last year or a year or two ago, right? But that would, I mean, we're like what 5 or 6 years out, so I don't know. That was sort of odd to me too. That was another context clue that kind of told us his age, but maybe he didn't quite.
Just a bit young.
Yeah.
Well, let's move away from Obi-Wan for a few minutes here, and let's talk about Lenara, like the planet Lenara, because this was a very unique aspect of this book. I'm just going to read you one quote. I had more, but just to save time, page 293. This was when the planet finally was like, everyone get out. They were cutting the lights on. It was.
I'm done with you.
Connected now, he felt the incredible network of lightning forming around the whole of the planet. It wasn't a temporary storm this time. Lenara was sealing itself away, protected against those who might harm its life forever. So straight up, guys, we got a sentient planet with more or less consumable force. Like we got force Lunchables, y'all. We got snack packs in this book.
That's what we need to pitch this book as, man. The Lunchable book.
Did this feel really out there, or did it feel like it fit well into the Star Wars galaxy? And just tell me how you kind of approach this planet that thought for itself and the Force Lunchables.
I dug it. First of all, I was a big fan.
Yep, same.
Big fan. Really clever idea that I've not really seen done before, I don't think. Right? Is this original? Can you guys think of anything similar, maybe?
Not to this level. Like
It's
planets
very-
have been imbued with the Force before. Planets have had sentience before. Like that stuff's happened all the time. But
Dagobah is fairly similar, right?
Yeah. And I think
like
Jared said there was one in Legends that was like very similar.
Jacob in the chat just said Yoda's Secret War did a very similar thing. It was modeled after Lord of the Flies story wise. So
Lord of the Flies.
But this was pretty unique as far as this. You eat this thing and then you get a certain amount of. It's like a video game. You get a certain bar of Force energy and then you use it up.
It felt kind of. I really like something that I think is definitely unique that we saw here. That I can't think of anything that's even kind of like this in Star Wars. Is that the animals were involved? That was very clever.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
It felt very like Stranger Things-esque, right? Were you guys picturing like the Demodogs from Stranger Things?
Sure, yeah.
I was the whole time.
Now I am.
That's what I was. Like they just sort of I love that. Like there was that scene where they're like, why is it so quiet? And then all the animals were like gathered around like the scar or whatever. I thought it was pretty clever. I would love to see this might really be an interesting idea to like do with Acto, is that how you say it? Acto, the island Luke, the island Luke goes to, because it has a little bit of that nature to it a little bit. Like I was picturing that dark side hole that Rey had in her vision as the you know what I'm talking about? Yeah. And then there was the mirrors thing. Like, I don't know, it's weird, trippy Force stuff. I was a big fan.
It's very Star Wars on brand there. So that's why I loved it. So it's like, how you can say stuff is very Legendsy. This is very Star Warsy. Very Star Wars.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah. And I think that's where I am with like did it feel like it was Star Wars? Yeah. This planet absolutely fits in it. It's not the weirdest one we've gotten. It's not the most normal one we've gotten. I think as far as it being a character, in the planet being a character, I think it was a really fun thing. I wish we got a little more early, but I really like where it went.
How dare you, Brandon?
Dark side hole does sound dirty. We're sorry about it. Moving on.
All right. Well,
I also wanted to ask you really quick before we move off of the planet thing. What did you guys? Because I made this joke before we came on. And I wanted to bring it up on the show. Like, what did you guys picture as the orbs that they plopped into their mouth to like get the Force power? Because that is hilarious to me. They can eat like
jelly gobstoppers. I feel like they're like boba, like in boba tea. Like you got a couple of those, but bigger.
I was thinking like pickled eggs. Pickled eggs.
I was too. Glowing blue pickled eggs. 100% what was in my head. That is hilarious.
Or you know what I thought?
Which give you energy, all right? It's a protein.
That's true.
And it gives you energy. If you're tired, you haven't eaten all day, I mean, it'll give you a quick pick-me-up.
Well, Obi-Wan knew they were bad. That's why they're called deviled eggs.
I will also say the eggs that Grogu was sucking in the Mandalorian, those glowing orbs. Like I thought that was pretty similar too.
Frog
Exactly,
babies?
the frog babies.
Frog babies.
That was definitely evil.
Not great.
I've never had a pickled egg. That's not related, but I just thought I'd bring it up.
Oh, maybe you should try
Treat
it.
yourself.
Maybe you'll
Maybe I
jump
will.
further.
Don't, the planet will kill you, Corey.
I'll jump higher.
I hear they have Chick-fil-A and Target in Hawaii. I'm sure they have a grocery store. That sells
Dude, I'm not gonna go buy
pickled
pickled eggs. Oh my god, I'll be sick for like days if it doesn't work out. That's so
It'll be
funny,
$4. $4 an egg.
If you're there for a month, you can pickle them yourself.
Jeez.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what those pickled eggs did for the locals on Lenara.
Yes.
The locals.
I love it.
Way to put that,
Great
Charles.
Segue.
On page 237, the people here didn't have to be parasites, sucking life from Lenara and giving nothing back. If they could let go, if they could give up consuming the power, the planet would sustain them as it sustained everything else. But because they treated this miraculous planet like an adversary to be fought, that was what it had become. It mirrored their energy right back at them. On page 256, last of all was Aj, cupping the power she had desperately clung to in order to keep her people safe. The power her parents had bequeathed to her and taught her was both her right and heritage, her only hope for survival. She stared down into the globe, it took a deep breath and released it. On page 262, Logrib, it's the best villain name I've heard in quite a while. Logrib
Pretty good.
says, everyone in the galaxy wants what the Jedi have, and the Jedi will do anything to keep it to themselves. Even my employer wants our power to be able to combat them. But it's not for him or for the Jedi or anyone else. The power on Lenara is mine. And lastly, on page 162, this is about the Force. Imagine giving it up, Zabri said. Imagine being cut off from it forever. In all his agonized indecision, he hadn't considered that. Because even if he wasn't a Jedi, he would still be connected to the Force. Whatever else he might question, he knew the Force was a part of him. And much as it tormented and frustrated him, much as he struggled to connect with it, the idea of reaching for it and having it just be gone, that was too terrible to imagine. Worse by far than the idea of not ever becoming a Jedi Knight. So is the Lenaran dependence on the power understandable to you? And maybe a better way to ask you that directly, a good thought experiment, if you yourself had access to a pickled egg from Hawaii that would give you Jedi powers, but cut your lifetime to a quarter, would you use it? Would you eat it?
You're just describing recreational drugs, Charles. I mean, straight up, like this is just like
Now be
cocaine
careful
or
how you answer, everyone.
methamphetamine. Like seriously, like
Yeah.
I mean, you can use it and you can jump higher,
Yeah.
but like you're probably gonna die a little sooner. So
As long as you microdose and keep it within levels.
Did they
I
try
will-
just
levels.
taking a bite out of the power? Was the
Exactly.
planet mad about that?
I will say this is also interesting because I'll put even a second little addendum onto this. In this particular case, your parents also told you that you got to take this meth. Like
Exactly.
that's the thing. Is like from the times you've been born, you've been told that you got that this
You're
coke gives you
dependent,
superpowers.
That's funny.
I'll answer the first part, Charles, and then I want to hear what you guys say. Like the dependence on the power, absolutely, I get it. I think that it makes complete sense. They've been raised that this is the way they got to do it. Their parents did it. It makes them feel incredible. Like it makes complete sense, and I do give Obi-Wan credit for at least understanding a little bit of that. Like he obviously tells them, "What are you doing? You should stop." But he's not like, "Why are you doing this? I can't imagine why." Like it's completely understandable is that if you stop this, you will kind of be quote unquote normal, and you will also be kind of betraying the will of your dead parents. Like that's a hard pill to swallow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's all they've ever known. They've learned that like that is the way to live, and going away from that is unheard of, right? So
Yes.
you put it
Very hard.
perfectly, Eric. There's no other way. I mean, they were. Yes, I understand that taking steroids will make me stronger, but if I stop taking the steroids, will I not be on varsity? I mean, I want
That's
really.
right.
I got to be on
Like,
varsity.
if you stop taking steroids, Wes, then baseball will be boring for a decade.
exactly.
Exactly.
That's the problem.
I also, I had a thought just now. You guys were talking about that, like that this would be a really fun idea to explore from like the Sith angle. I think of like the Sith maybe discover a planet like this where they can abuse it and take its power, like, and how that could like affect a society like that is based on it. That would be really clever.
The Force Awakens.
It
took the power. It took the power from Ilum, right?
Yeah,
used it to kill everything. Right. So there's
exactly that kind of
resemblance.
That would be clever.
But I also wouldn't do it. I was saying for the second part of that, no. Like, because one, I'm 30 right now. I'd be dead. So like, I'm not done.
But imagine all you could have accomplished.
I do every day, Charles. Thank you.
These
dumb kids didn't do anything except eat fruit and like jump around in trees like Tarzan. So it's not like they were like curing cancer or something.
Sounds like a happy life to me, man.
I would have totally done it.
Charles, listen, man. I can assure you, if you want nothing else than to do drugs and jump around in trees, there's somewhere on the world that can be your life. All right.
Wait a minute, I'll die when I'm 25, but you can. If you had told me when I was 7 that, hey, listen, here's the deal, man. You're 7 years old right now. You'll be a superhero until you're 30. You have no worries about it, and then it's over.
There's nothing stopping you from selling everything you own, putting all that money in cocaine, and like going to the rainforest.
Reel it in.
And that's the clip, everyone. That's the clip.
Reel it back in. I like that you brought that point up, though, Eric, because these are
You've been in Hawaii for a day, my guy.
Corey's feeling loose. But you're right. These are kids. And if you present that whole red pill, blue pill, or whatever debate, to a child, that's a very different question than it is for us at this point in life. So anyways,
we are adults here. By the way, see my new Lego that I built this week?
There it is. So I had a couple more quotes here that, or a couple more prompts rather, that I was gonna maybe skip for time, but I really want to ask you guys.
Yeah, let's hit it. One part. Let's go.
So page 62 is a cute quote for you. He realized with a burst of startled laughter what exactly was wrong. This was the first time he'd ever been alone, truly alone. Sure, he'd been separated from his group while finding his Kyber crystal, and yes, he meditated alone, or at least tried to, but even then, there had been other people in reach. Someone at the other end of a comm, or behind a door, or across a hall. Someone at the end of his journey waiting for him. Now, Obi-Wan was on his own. On page 116, he's talking about the Lenarans, and he says, even though no one here had parents, it was clear they were a family. It made Obi-Wan miss the closeness of his own youngling initiate clan. No wonder he felt a little lost and more than a little alone. After they had passed their trials, they separated, assigned to different Jedi. He'd lost his clan. His Padawan friends were all busy, and the most important bond he had was supposed to be with a Jedi who couldn't even bother to show up when he promised he would. A Jedi who had never wanted to train him in the first place. And then finally, page 136, even though he was far from home and not where he should be, at that moment, Obi-Wan couldn't help feeling like he was exactly where he wanted to be. So this book really highlighted for me, more so than maybe ever before, how the Jedi take in these younglings, introduce them into a new family-like environment, and then they take that away as well. And so what were your thoughts on hearing how close Obi-Wan was to the rest of the Gryffindors in his clan, if you will, and how he was forced to give that up if he was going to become the thing he was supposed to become?
It's familiar, I think, is the saddest answer of that. I think it reminded me of going to college, honestly. It reminded me of like going to this place away from family and being like, I'm going to live within feet of my best friends in the universe for years. And then it's like, all right, go do the thing, separate. And it's like, and that was for 4 years, much less the most formative years. And I think it is familiar, but it's also thinking of going through that process at 16, 17. It made me realize how hard that is and how much respect I think I now have for Jedi in Star Wars that are able to do it and are able to be masters and are able to do all these things and be fully formed because what is it? Is it the Yoda quote? Like the Force is my ally, right? I think that's where you got to get to is that you got to be okay with losing the physical proximity, because if you're keyed into the Force, truly keyed into the Force, then you are never far away from anyone, right? Like what Chirrut says to Baze, like, look to the Force, you'll always find me, right? Like, if you actually are keyed into everyone you love in the Force, then you're good. But if you're not, that probably freaking sucks, man. Like, that's probably really hard.
It is a lesson in growing up, right? So you can't, I mean, you can, but a lot of people will grow up with a core group of friends when you go through school or, Jedi training, and then you branch out and you start learning something new based on different points of view. You move for a job, you move for family. So I think once you get to that point where he is almost trained up as a Padawan, and everybody kind of breaks off, and he loses his core group of friends, he's taking that next step in learning various points of view, new adventures. There's more to that small core group than what he initially is learning. So I think it's just all a part of growing up, and that's one of the great aspects of these young adult novels. Helps people understand.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, well, I'm going to just throw this last one at you quickly. There's a moment in this book where Obi-Wan doesn't recognize Count Dooku. He's like silver hair, cape, deep voice. Maybe it's a senator. And he later figures out that it's Count Dooku, but it threw me off. And it made me question, and I want to know what you guys think.
Wes?
How much insight is there into Jedi lineage, for like lack of a better term? Like, do Padawans not know much about their master's master? Do they not?
I found that entire scene to be very much out of place, frankly, because Dooku was on the Jedi Council, right? This was said. Obi-Wan was in the Jedi while he was on the Council. Obi-Wan 100% would have recognized Dooku, and known who he was. So I thought that was very odd, out of place. Like, it didn't really add much to the plot necessarily. That Obi-Wan didn't recognize it. I don't know why they went there. That was sort of an odd decision, I feel like.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's like, it's not so much like, look at your grandpa, because
right.
I do think some masters don't show pictures, but I do think
that's Papa.
Look at this statue.
But I do think in this particular master case, I agree, Corey. I think that Dooku is enough of a figure that people know who he is.
It was a big deal. He's one of the only 20 lost. I rarely have that kind of criticism about a Star Wars book that, I think that was a bad decision. But legitimately, I don't understand how this is possible. I don't think it is possible. Yeah. I think it just might be a little bit of a stretch of the imagination to achieve a storytelling point necessarily, but maybe it wasn't really necessary, and frankly, it might not really be plausible in my opinion.
Right.
Especially sorry to interrupt, especially the way that Obi-Wan and Dooku talk later in Attack of the Clones and stuff too, of don't forget, I was once Qui-Gon's master just as he was yours. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It was a stretch for me for sure.
Could have been just a little bit of a symbolism.
Can I interrupt you one more time? I'm just kidding.
It could have been just a little bit of symbolism and storytelling, and putting just a little bit of darkness over Dooku and what he will become later on.
Yeah.
So
are we maybe remembering that incorrectly? Did he see him and not recognize him? Because the point that I remember is that he heard his voice and didn't recognize his voice.
So he says he peered around the corner and caught sight of a tall, black cloaked frame, a head of elegant silver hair disappearing through a hallway. And he had also heard his voice previous to that.
Yeah.
And he says
maybe that is subtle enough then that's plausible.
I think the point was just for the drama for the audience, because we know exactly who that is. So story wise, it's a good decision. I think it's a fine decision, but if you ask yourself, man, wouldn't Obi-Wan have recognized him? I think probably. Anyways.
But maybe not if it was just the back of his head, though, as he's passing through.
I would recognize the back of your head any day.
Oh, man, that means a lot to me, because
so
you don't see that very often. Usually it's front-facing camera, it means a lot.
I will say, I went when I first, and you might see this in the
back of your head is ridiculous.
Oh my God, amazing. If you do on our Patreon, you see the actual documentary, you might see me quite literally not recognize the back of Wes's head.
That's true.
That's true.
It literally is on camera. Is this Wes?
Could it be?
It was hard. It's hard.
Jacob just said in the chat, it was funny listening to the audiobook and getting the reveal a decent amount earlier, because the narrator nailed his voice. He must have, so he got Dooku's voice right.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. We didn't talk about that this time, actually. We forgot to mention how we digested this. I didn't listen to the audiobook this time. That's kind of unusual for me. Usually.
Yeah.
I read it on my Kindle because I read it on the plane. So
Right.
I'm all digital now. So I read it on that.
Yep. I did this bad boy right here. Did the physical.
Hardcover. Yeah.
Yep.
I'm still going strong audible wise on the way to work.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm physical copy every time.
Except for this time because you lost the book.
Well, yeah, half the physical copy.
Who loses a book that they're actively reading, Charles?
Listen, I'm not proud of it. I thought this was a safe space to share.
Homeownership is tough, man.
Charles's new house is so massive, guys.
I think it's somewhere down in the basement in the Bogan collection now. I'm not really sure.
What happened to you, Charles? You used to be cool, then you got money.
I haven't gotten any money yet, but all right.
It's tough.
Let's talk about some quick Easter eggs, connective tissue, random thoughts, as we always do. And there really aren't too many in this book. I think the YA books, tend to be a little bit lighter on them. But let's run through the ones that I found. On page one, demon squid is mentioned. It was in Obi-Wan's soup, if you remember that.
Oh yeah,
Demon squid. That was such an odd scene.
I love that band.
in the audiobook, you thought this was gonna be like a crazy like fight scene of this, like they really built it up with the music and everything, and you're like,
That's
yeah,
funny.
and you're just like,
I like
it's
that.
just done. It's just octopus.
Oh, it's just lunchtime.
Yeah.
Lunchtime with the Padawans. Yeah.
No, but it's the Star Wars octopus. Look it up on Wikipedia. It's literally just a picture of an octopus. And this is its first appearance in canon, actually, though it was previously in several Legends books, including Jedi, Corey.
Interesting.
We got there.
I know.
On
I think
page 20.
the authors are just continually trying to put Jedi in everything canon. Eventually, the whole book is just going to be canon.
It's going to be We Jedi. On page 20, there's some High Republic representation. A quick search of Comac was also interesting, but he found himself drifting back to Orla. He felt a connection to this Jedi who had come so long before him. So that was cool, right? Just to get that Orla and Comac shout out. And it makes probably all of us that are reading the High Republic a little bit more excited for that next book.
That's right. Getting close too, man. It's coming right around the corner.
It's happening.
Yeah. On page 39, here's a quote for you. All Obi-Wan's hopes would be dashed, like blocks of ice they had once snuck up and dropped from the top of the temple, shattering on the ground so many stories beneath, lost to the perpetual darkness of the lowest levels of Coruscant. It's not perpetual darkness down there. It's other people. So, how do we know that these Jedi didn't commit manslaughter and Obi-Wan's just fondly remembering
Oh my God.
dropping ice blocks off of the temple?
That's a testament.
They're just the pores. Who cares?
It really is. It shows the divide.
Are they really people though, Charles?
Oh my God.
Jeez, man.
Well, if they hadn't canceled 1313, we'd know, wouldn't we?
I know. It is a testament to, though, maybe like such a subtle thing, but it is a testament to of like the separation between, the rest of Coruscant and the underbellies,
Oh my
right?
God.
Yeah.
Wow.
I thought that was super messed up. Anyways,
Yeah.
page 41, Siri nodded. She and Obi-Wan had been close growing up, and he missed that closeness now. He missed all of them, really. They'd been a merry band of brats, as Yaddle had once muttered under her breath during a particularly raucous lesson. So first of all, shout out to Yaddle.
Wait,
You're a real MVP.
Wait, Yaddle?
You want to say Yaddle? Okay.
Yaddle!
First of all,
Yaddle!
Yaddle. Second of all, Jacob said this is the energy that led to the death of Martez's parents.
Oh, no.
No!
That is the
right,
darkest thing.
The
you've
Martez
ever said,
sisters.
Jacob.
I am
Always
seeing,
the-
though, there is a increase in the Yaddle representation in canon. It's
There is.
slowly creeping in.
It is. I know.
There is indeed. All right. Some of Obi-Wan's classmates, Yaddle, like Yaddle. We might have seen them before. There's one, here we go. I don't know how to pronounce these names, Eric. I only read the books.
Oh, you'll be fine. You'll be fine.
Prie, P-R-I-E, I don't know, for instance, previously mentioned in Master and Apprentice by Claudia Gray.
Oh.
So that was not a new classmate of Obi-Wan's.
Interesting.
Bala, who was playing the pranks on Obi-Wan, he may not be a name that you necessarily remember off the bat, but I bet you remember him if you've watched the Clone Wars TV show, because he's the Rodian who later served as the keeper of the holocron that had all the Force-sensitive children's identities on it.
The one that they brutally tortured to death and kill on screen.
That dude on screen.
It's one of the most violent scenes in all of the Clone Wars.
So Bala got what was coming to him, is what I'm saying, after that Demon Squid prank.
Holy smokes. That is
Bala.
quite the pull. I did not realize that at all.
I know.
I can't believe I still can't believe that wasn't in that was in the Clone Wars. Like that was they electrocuted him to death.
That was rated TV PG-13. You saw
the light leave his eyes. Or whatever. It was dark as hell, man.
Yeah, it was rough. It was rough. Siri was the other one. It's another Legends pull straight from Jude Watson's Jedi Apprentice series. And she'd already been mentioned in canon. Actually, she was brought over to canon by Mackenzie Lee in the short story There's Always Another from a certain point of view. And she actually appeared in Mike Chan's Brotherhood a few short months ago.
Oh, sure.
She got some.
Who is this? Nice... One of the other Padawans?
Siri.
Yeah,
I remember that.
Siri. Okay.
Hey, Siri.
Don't say that.
Don't. my screen just goes blank.
Yeah. Everybody
listening to this
now.
out loud. God damn it.
And the other Padawan, Alexa. No. On page 52. On page 52, an Ortolan is featured, and Ortolans were, this is the quote, Ortolans were known for being incredibly dexterous, employed as everything from mechanics to musicians, surgeons to artists. And so I feel like that's a nice nod to Max Rebo, who was an Ortolan, since they're talking about musicians. And we all know Max Rebo's got a gig.
He's got a gig. Oh, I love that robot chicken bit.
On page 55, a vector is shown. So some more High Republic love. I don't know if y'all caught that.
I did not catch that.
It's in the hangar. On page 62, with a burst of excitement, Obi-Wan did a completely unnecessary barrel roll and then a loop just for the sake of it. Nothing could ever ruin flying for him, not when it felt like this. And that's multiple references because let's try spinning. That's a good trick. And also is good foreshadowing for Master and Apprentice, where we learn how Obi-Wan grows to hate flying. Right?
Yeah.
Can we go back for a second? Because we blew right past this. Did you say there was a vector in the hangar in the Jedi Temple?
Yeah, there's a vector.
That's kind of a big deal, isn't it? That's like we've not seen.
55?
They said it was like a derelict ship, and I believe it was a vector. Yeah,
holy smokes!
No, I think you're right. I think I missed it.
That is quite the reference, if that's true. If there's still like ships and stuff from the High Republic stuff.
Obi-Wan walked as casually as he could to Meba, who was bouncing and humming as she worked on an old Vector, a model that was hardly used anymore.
I remember that now. Yeah.
Wow, that is super cool, man. I would love to see some of that stuff brought into modern canon somehow. Like,
dude, for real. I mean, I got the X-wing and the Falcon on my arm right now. A Vector might be my next tattoo, guys. I've been thinking about how to get a High Republic involved on my arm here. So let me know on Patreon if you want to get a tattoo. Force me, please.
Good catch, Charles.
That was awesome.
Thank you. On page 88, Obi-Wan says hello there. I just couldn't resist.
Of course.
I think everyone caught that one.
Oh, he says that a lot, Charles.
Yeah, he does say that a lot. It wasn't just the one time.
Like his thing.
I think he says it in that movie, that one.
Yeah, can't remember.
On page 101, one of the children on Lenara is noted to be Iktachi, which is a species we don't see very often. It's the same species, though, as Sacy Tin, if you can think of Sacy Tin, with the big horns on the side of his head. So that was cool. And speaking of the Jedi Council, on page 103, Kit Fisto himself gets mentioned. It's always fun.
That's right. Remember that
guy with the fingers.
The entire premise of Nautiluns being in barrels was stupid and hilarious. That was so funny.
Yeah, that was weird.
We're aquatic. Do you want to leave this planet? Nah, I think I'm fine. I'll just
we're
live in this barrel forever.
I mean, I'm already all moved in. I mean.
I put up some artwork. I don't take it down.
On page 173, here's a quote. And besides, Obi-Wan said, rushing to change the subject for himself more than anyone. I would never want to be in a relationship with a leader, too close to politicians or royalty. I'm sure if I ever fell in love, it would be with someone calm, peaceful, easy to get along with. Yeah, that sounds exactly like Satine.
Yeah, exactly.
A little bit.
On page 152, a Garolian ghost viper is mentioned, and that is a great pull from Matthew Stover's Revenge of the Sith novelization when Count Dooku compared the quickness of Obi-Wan's lightsaber combat to flicks of a Garolian ghost viper tongue.
Wow.
Wow.
Whoa.
Can I just say, I love how much Star Wars authors in the modern day love that novelization. Like, it's in our Essential 6 novels. We sing its praises all the time on the site, everywhere we go. But from Brotherhood, Mike Chen was, we talked on that roundtable, Mike Chen adored that novelization.
Oh, yeah.
Kiersten White here, like, people pull from that
Just the
so
last
much,
2
and
years, especially.
Yeah,
it's been a
like
renaissance
17 years
for
old.
Revenge of the Sith. I know, it's crazy.
Yeah. Also, Revenge of the Sith is 17 years old, y'all. If you want to sit in that for a second.
I also like to think
Sit in that warm
I
bath.
like to think that Utini has played a small role in that in some way, because we have pushed really, really hard that has been the best novel ever written. And
You got to preach the gospel, guys. That's what I'm saying.
It's true. It's true.
I read it.
Yeah, Wes read it. If that tells you anything.
That's on the back of the novel, actually. If you look at the back, it says, I read it, Wes Jenkins.
Whenever they do the Essential Legends Collection version of Revenge of the Sith, however, the Del Rey, you have our permission. I read it, Wes, you teeny.
There's someone out there that picked that up off a Barnes & Noble bookcase and was like, well, did Wes read it?
All right, we got to make a custom dust jacket that people can order, and it just, Wes read it on the front.
They used to, kids, they used to have like the staff recommends at VHS, like Blockbuster Video, and they would have the staff like recommendations, and you go over there and you pick like, oh, Joseph over there recommends these 6 movies or whatever. So you go and you check and do like the Joseph recommends.
This is the West recommends.
I literally just heard a cricket outside of my window, and I thought it was from one
Amazing.
of y'all.
We got a few more to push through. On page 176, Chondo peppers are mentioned, as can be seen and prepared in the official Black Spire Outpost cookbook. I feel like that cookbook gets at least one reference per canon.
Right, seriously.
It's super fun. It's super fun.
I think there must have been a shockingly low number of food in Legends. So they just had to add a bunch of them for the book, the cookbook.
On page 185, since we didn't mention him in the recap, but Eric, you brought him up earlier. How about the addition of Dexter Jetster?
What do you know?
Yeah, member of the actual best heist team, might I add.
Okay, not if you check the count.
That surprised me, honestly. I was not expecting him to show up in this book, and that's their first introduction to it. We got their origin story. That was like kind of big. He was also such a wholesome dude too. Like he was such a wholesome character. I loved him.
Yeah, he wasn't a piece of crap.
What? No, screw that guy. He's a jerk. Let's mutiny. Like, he was great.
Yeah, I mean, Dex is like as much as it's been a year for Obi-Wan, it's been a year for Dex. He's in Brotherhood. He's in Padawan. Like, I love it. Like, it's actually really giving again Obi-Wan that kind of. Are they besties? Like, are they actually that tight?
Yeah.
Does he get his own live action character next?
I know, but he just got the ship that he's going to go use to mine on Subterrail with. Like, he's excellent.
That's right.
Yes. Yeah. Love Dex. Love Dex in this book.
Yes. On page 199, Obi-Wan utters one of his other nice quotes, so uncivilized.
That's true.
I will say, that one slightly took me out. I want to be fully transparent. Like, I love Easter eggs. I love when they go in there. But the memification of the catchphrases of Obi-Wan in the modern day, like, hello there, I love, for some reason, so uncivilized as this 16-year-old kid. I'm like...
a little bit much.
Just for a second. It's fun, but I'm like, that's the line. That's the thing. It's teetering.
Yeah. Well, later on page 202, Obi-Wan says, "Oh, I'll never have a Padawan as bad as I am." Obi-Wan was sure of that. Cue Anakin slaughtering Tuskens once again.
That's right.
Second reference.
Who among us haven't? Who among us? Come on.
On page 227, Elzar Mann is referenced. Orla states that she's just been tasked to help him, meaning that she was on Lenara just before the events of the Fallen Star, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Cool. And then I'm going to jump back to maybe the deepest pull, my favorite one, maybe page 219. A Sargonian behemoth tick is mentioned, and as far as I know, this was a pull from all the way back in the 1977 Star Wars comic run, issue 28, when Han Solo, in reference to these stone mites that are chasing him and Chewbacca, he says, "Those little demons are hanging on like Sargonian behemoth ticks."
Holy
that was like
smokes.
Charles, every single time you outdo yourself.
What issue is that?
We're going to end there. Issue 28. You can
Of the
find it on
original
wall.
Marvel run?
Of the original run.
OG.
yes.
The 28th comic that had ever been made. That is some of the earliest Star Wars lore that's ever
Wow.
created. That was going
mumbo
on.
jumbo at the time.
That was well before any of the books had been a thought.
Yes,
like
Jacob. Those are shenanigans.
Yeah.
Shenanigans.
Wow,
No
that
one was
is
proofreading that.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Somebody did, and they made it into a
that's
Wikipedia
cool.
article. Or maybe
Right.
maybe the author read the original. If we ever interview her,
Yeah.
maybe we can ask her.
Kiersten
we should
White,
ask.
absolutely.
We should ask. But
That's
that's
so
it.
cool.
That's it, guys. If I missed your favorite Easter egg and you're watching, you're listening, let me know in the comments. Otherwise, let's wrap this up because, again, this is just a one-parter. So any final thoughts on Padawan by Kiersten White? Let's just go back around the same order we started, I guess. Eric, you started for us. What are your final thoughts?
My final thoughts are: this is a very fun YA novel about Obi-Wan. I think that we've gotten so many amazing books this year, like for real. The quality has been insane that I think this somehow got lost in the shuffle a little bit, but it's really fun. And I think it brought, more so than anything, a lot of really cool Force lore to the forefront. I love seeing Obi-Wan, aside from being a teacher, aside from being the perfect student, and figuring out how he got there in the first place. The ending of this book is, I think, the best part of it, which I think is really good. So if you're reading this book or you, for some reason, want to go back to it, if you haven't read it yet, we're sorry we spoiled the whole thing for you. But the ending of it really is, I think, really fun. It leaves you with a really great taste of Obi-Wan getting back to the temple. And I will say, more so than anything, this made me want to get more of the temple antics now that Obi-Wan has gone through this trial. And I think any book that makes you want more of the characters that it included is a success. And in that way, I think it made me want to know more about Obi-Wan's story. And even though, as you said, Charles, at the top of this, it's been Obi-Wan year. We've gotten Brotherhood. We've gotten Padawan. We got the show. I am not sick of Obi-Wan Kenobi content yet. And I think that's the highest compliment I can give. I want more.
Yeah.
For sure. This book was really fun. I think it was, I think initially I was a little bit not super into the book. I think it took me about halfway through the book, but then I really got enthralled with it and really enjoyed it after that point. This was a really short read. It's a quick read. I don't think that, I think the fact that it's as short as it is, honestly, like keeps it off of being a list of books that you could maybe skip. You know what I mean? Like, it takes no commitment. So like, no, don't skip it because it's an easy book to get through.
Fun
right.
read.
And yeah. It was super fun. I think it added some really interesting tidbits about Obi-Wan as a character, and I enjoyed it overall. I would call it a positive experience.
Yeah, I mean, I enjoyed it as well. It's a great audiobook, just like all of them are. But it would also, I think it is a good storytelling, I guess a good storytelling initiative for younger readers to help them understand what's going on in the world. Like, yes, you have concerns and anxiety and stuff like that, but as long as you look within yourself and you surround yourself with the right people, then everything will work out.
I just want to touch on that, Wes, real quick, because I think we slightly mentioned it, but I just want to reinforce that point. If you know a teenager that wants a Star Wars book, this is a great one. I think if I was a teenager and I said, I'm going through that stuff you mentioned, Wes, but so is Obi-Wan freaking Kenobi, I think there's a lot of power in that.
Yeah,
So I love that.
especially
Great point.
having seen the Obi-Wan series just now, I'm sure everybody's seen it. I also want to leave you gentlemen with a poll from a 1991 masterpiece, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Secret of the Ooze.
I love you so much.
Logrib is the super shredder who consumes the ooze and turns into the giant muscle-bound behemoth that literally destroys the deck and takes out the Ninja Turtles. 1991, gentlemen.
I mean, you kind of did describe the climax of this book. So
awesome.
Wow.
Yeah.
He drinks
Same
the
guy,
ooze.
for sure.
Kiersten White, we see you.
Well, I agree with everything you guys said, including that pull, Wes. Thank you for that.
Wow.
I'm not sure how I missed that one in the Easter eggs. Again, it's been the summer of Obi-Wan. This is probably my least favorite installment of the summer of Obi-Wan, but that's not to say it's not a really enjoyable book. I still very much enjoyed this book. I think that it's great to see young Obi-Wan. It's something we got a decent amount of in Legends, and it's something I'd like to see more of. Like, I hope that Padawan is not the last time that we see Obi-Wan kind of in this time period. So
right.
I do hope there's more, and there's so many books coming out now. I'm sure. So
sorry about that.
Wes is going and queuing up Ninja Turtles. Can you watch it after?
Before we go off the rails, Eric, why don't you take us home?
All right, sounds good. Thank you everyone for tuning in for this one-part roundtable about Padawan, I should say. Next week on The Living Force, we are talking all about Andor. You heard of it? Yeah. Little indie show. We're doing our official preview show. Everything we've heard so far, all of our thoughts about it. We're dedicating to it because it is coming out this month. We hope you tune in for that. If you have thoughts about Padawan, let us know in our Discord. Let us know on Twitter. Let us know in the YouTube comments. It is so fun talking about these books with all of you, and we hope that everything we put out on UTD makes you folks enjoy the books even more, because what a gift it is to speak about books in freaking Star Wars. It's just the best time of all. But on that note, my friends, that'll do it for this week's episode of The Living Force, brought to you by Hawaii. If you already support us on Patreon, make sure to stick it out. The Asheville documentary is coming. The 50th episode of Star Wars Archives is coming, and there's never been a better time to join at utini.com/Patreon or patreon.com/utini. A special thank you to Brian Dooley, Patrick Ortiz, Earl Q, Robert Thomas, and Carl Sander on our Jedi High Council, and Elizabeth Cloutier and Sally and Chris Eilerson on our Alliance High Command. You can find us on Twitter. I'm at Eric Eilerson. Corey is at Corey M. Helton. Charles is at C. Henkel. Wes is at Boss Wes. A special thank you to Matt Davenport, our amazing editor, Ryan, our graphic designer extraordinaire, and Wes, our producer and community manager. Thank you to Corey, Charles, and Wes for partnering with me tonight. Thanks to all of you for tuning in. And as always, may the Force be with you.